Hi everyone, welcome to our 19th episode of Girls Tech Talk. This is Srema and Tara is with me. So, this episode we are going to talk about backing service. So, backing service is a continuation of our 12 factor episode. So, if we are thinking about cloud transformation and what is the architecture principle that we are following in terms of cloud transformation, then backing service is one of the key factors. So the definition is very wide. So if you think about it actually says like what are the necessary service or necessary components I have in my application. So that is the basics of the backing services. But when we are and that says like if we are designing applications, mostly if we are thinking about API based application, if we are thinking about cloud transformation project, and API is mainly for data communication. It transport data, but it's not only just the API layer. Sometimes it communicates with data, and sometimes it has its own database, and sometimes it communicates with different systems like SAP, CRM, or third party vendor systems. So it's very important, like when we are defining, how do I define that bound systems that I am thinking that I need to communicate. So in our previous episode we talked about a platform or vendor locking. Like in cloud is like kind of a liberal way of developing softwares. Like we are not bound to a particular resources. The same thought process we are also applying here when we are designing the applications. So, for example, if my API is communicating with a database and the database is already, I can see some issues with the database. So, I will not be strictly bound, strictly dependent on my database, and I will be designing in such a way so that I can replace my database configurations in the configuration section of my application, and I can save my application from failing. So so that is the design principle. So from a developer perspective, it's like how we are following the best practices and how I am defining the boundaries and what are the configurations we are making. So this is an broad example of what is backing services, and I will lean on Tara to give you some advantage and disadvantages of, or I could say like best practices that we should follow while designing backing services.
Yes. So as I guess we have given this information multiple times, uh, it's more or less it's same what it should be following with microservices, and backing services is one of those part where you actually have to follow few of the things so that your microservices perform very well. So I'll just give you three of the very basic examples of practices which we follow on day-to-day basis for microservices pattern to be there in your application, or that is also part of I can say the 12 factors. So the first thing first is there should not be a tight coupling for calling the other services or calling the external systems from your application. So it is like whenever you have to call an external application or external system from your service, it should be in such a way that it can only be changed from the configuration itself. You don't have to do changes in your code. That is one of the thing. And then it comes like whenever you have those external applications or those external systems are not available, or it's down for some reason, or maybe a deployment going on over there, due to those reasons your service or your application should not be down as well. Like if you remember, or if you have worked in monolithic services, it's like when you perform a deployment, even you have to perform deployment for one area of your application, you have to take a downtime for your whole application. So if you want to follow a good practice for having a proper microservices, or if you want to follow best practice as part of backing services, your application should not be dependent on the existence of the external services. So the call should be in such a way, or it should have been written in such a way that even if that service or that application is not available, it should still be running and the user should not be impacted due to that downtime. For example, when we use email system, when we use SMTP relay for sending our email, due to some reason, if that server is down, the SMTP server is not working as expected, or there is any issue, the user should not be getting errors while sending the email. It can go to the cache or it can go to your draft, and as soon as that server is available, it should fire that email to the receiver. So that is one thing. That is a second thing which you can think of while designing your solution or microservices. And the last thing is, all of your services, all of your packing services should be in such a way that it can be enabled or disabled based on your requirement. And also it should be like there should not be any redeployment required for doing that enablement or disablement of your service feature. So that is one thing. Again, as I said, the earlier 2 points relates to the third point. If you take care of the first two practices, eventually the third one will be easier to achieve. And I think those are the three very basic thing which you can follow as part of backing services, which you can follow as part of 12 factors, and that will give you a more gripping and a better microservices solution. I think these are the three things, basic things which I wanted to add. More on you, Shrima. You can just go on with all these details of backing service.
Yeah, thanks, Tara. So if you think logically, it's like, it's more of in theory, like how backing services are. So if you think like, from a developer perspective, or what I have seen, like, when a particular development squad works, they can see only the APIs they are building. Sometimes they might not be having the visibility how the other part of the enterprise applications work. But when we see the proper architecture blueprint, we see the benefits, like, okay, and sometimes you might be thinking, so it's actually communicating with this, so why adding some extra layer? But it's an, I would say, theoretical practice that we are following. If I am trying to communicate with from my code to an database, from my code to a different server, or from my code to a tool or to another API, it's always advisable to adding a layer on of it, so that when it's required, I can add it, or maybe I can get rid of it. So that is the idea behind it. And I feel like most of the cloud solutions are uh, most of the cloud solution are built by this approach. So it's actually kind of goes hands on hands with how we are describing the platform locking, and the same way we are describing the backing services. So today, but sometimes there are constraints, like, if I am writing my code such a way, like it is only written for SQL server, it's only written for Oracle server, then we cannot have much on our hand. But if we know, like, this is the database schema, this is the request and response it is going to expect, this API is going to expect, so then it's easier for us. That's all for today.
Yeah. So thanks everyone for joining today's session, and I guess we will be covering more of 12 factors because we feel like it's one of the very important aspects of going towards microservices and going towards a cloud architecture and using the platform. It can be anything. It can be Azure, it can be AWS, can be Google, anything. But I guess these are the very basic thing which every architect or developer has to follow so that they can come up with a better solution. So we will be covering more on this 12 factor in details. For today's session, I guess we are done. Hope you had a great time learning about backing services. Have a great weekend, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.